As soon as I saw her, I knew she was the one. We'd simultaneously arrived at the party and now I was looking at her sitting on the floor, her legs to one side, and she looked absolutely gorgeous. I don't know what it is about women in dresses and high heels, but given half a chance, I'd be putty in the hands of any woman who obviously cares about her appearance, and Katie certainly cared a lot about hers. I know a black dress, or LBD to use the vernacular, is a cliché, but Katie's was stunning. A hemline high enough to show off her amazing legs, looking all the better encased in black nylon, with sheer fabric above the bust and on the sleeves adding sophistication. This was not a dress for a tart but for a woman who is quietly confident in her own skin. And those shoes, black patent stiletto pumps with a heel high enough to look elegant but not so high as to detract from the elegance of the dress. And her makeup was just perfect. Dark-lined eyes just inviting you to look deeply into them, and deep red lips which seemed to gently blow a kiss every time she spoke, all framed by her dark blonde hair which fell onto her shoulders, gently caressing them as she moved. How could any man not fall for Katie? As I approached her, she smiled and moved over so that I could sit down beside her. There was something familiar about her even though I'd never met her before, and this feeling increased as we talked. Within a few minutes, it felt like I'd known her forever. And if I was smitten before talking to her, within 30 minutes I was totally in love with her. We enjoyed the same leisure interests, laughed at the same things, and had the same views on pretty well everything. She was definitely the one. Now I'm a naturally shy person. I don't make friends easily, and many is the time I've gone home dejected after a party, kicking myself because, yet again, I'd been turned down. But as I sat talking to Katie, I knew that I had to muster every bit of strength I had to ask her out on a date, because I would never forgive myself if I let her slip through my fingers. And, in all honesty, we were getting on so well together that I knew that her positive response was almost guaranteed. Almost. I took a deep breath and asked her if she'd like to go out for a meal with me. The smile that had radiated from her face disappeared, replaced with a look of pity in her eyes as she gently said, "I'm sorry, but no thank you." I was devastated and must have looked like a pathetic creature as I asked, "But why not? We were getting on so well." Katie looked down as she thought for a few moments and then looked me straight in the eye. "You're a sweet guy, and I want to be honest with you. I hope I'm not going to make you feel uncomfortable with what I'm about to say." By now, I was fighting back the tears, but I just nodded my agreement for her to let me have it with both barrels. "There are 2 reasons I've turned you down. The first is that we're too different and you're not my type." Ouch! That hurt. "But we have so much in common," I protested. "But do we really? We enjoy the same things, but does that really mean that we're the same? We've come to the same party, but do we really look like a couple?" I looked at Katie in her black dress and heels, and then at myself in a pair of jeans, slightly frayed at the bottom, and scuffed shoes. My idea of dressing up for that party had been to replace my normal t-shirt with a shirt with a collar. And I realized that Katie had the world at her beautifully manicured fingertips. She could be whatever she wanted to be with whoever she wanted to be with, but the truth was that my life was defined by apathy, making excuses for my lack of achievement rather than taking proactive actions to get what I wanted. But if I wasn't her type, I asked her, then who was? Katie looked around the room. "Him, for example," she said, pointing to a guy sitting on a sofa at the far end. I looked at him and, like me, he was casually dressed, but unlike me he seemed to have taken care over what he wore, not just put it on with a shrug that it'll do. And he appeared confident too. I'm sure he wouldn't have started shaking and gone bright red if he'd been the one asking Katie out on a date. The message was quite clear: if I wanted to date Katie, I'd have to clean up my act. "But I can change," I pleaded. "Can you really?" challenged Katie. "I bet I'm not the first woman like me to turn you down." I nodded. There had been many like her. I'd always made a beeline for girls like her who liked to show off their femininity by wearing dresses, heels, and makeup. And it had always ended the same way, with rejection. And I bet that in every single case, when you saw the woman of your dreams with another guy, you looked at him and knew exactly why she'd gone for him and not you. And I bet in every single case you vowed to change but never did. So why should this time be any different? Katie was bang on. I'd vowed to change so many times but never had, and that had now come back to haunt me. I could live with the rejections from all of the others, but how could I ever get over Katie's rejection? And yet I knew that pleading with her would only make her resolve stronger as I looked more and more like the pathetic soul I was starting to feel. At that moment, I realized that I could never be the guy that Katie wanted, not because I didn't have the ability but because I didn't have the resolve. It was time to admit defeat. I thanked her for her honesty and stood up to leave. Katie told me to sit back down because she still needed to tell me the second reason she'd rejected me. She looked straight into my eyes and smiled once more. "You don't recognize me, do you? You look familiar, but I don't know why," I replied. "You need to think harder," she urged. I looked at her harder, trying to find any clue that would tell me who she was. And then I noticed it, a tiny mole just to the left of her nose. A tiny mole identical to the one I had by my nose. That was a bit of a coincidence, I thought, but then I noticed a scar about an inch long on her wrist, again identical to one I had on my wrist. "My God!" I exclaimed when the penny had dropped. "You can't be." "Yes, I can, and I most definitely am," she laughed. "I am your inner woman." "But I didn't know I had one." "Oh, I think you did," giggled Katie. "You've been looking for me for years." And Katie was right. I had been cross-dressing for years and enjoying the sensations of female clothes. I'd love to put on dresses and high heels and stand in front of the mirror admiring myself because, unlike all of the women that had turned me down, my reflection in the mirror was there for as long as I wanted her to be. But I was in denial. "Oh, that was only about the clothes, nothing more," I protested. "Really?" Katie was having none of it. "So all of the times you've cried from the frustration of not being who wish you'd been or meant nothing? All of the times you've looked at a woman in the street or on TV and envied her with every fiber in your body meant nothing? All of those times when you've dressed like I'm dressed now and fantasized that someone would come along and sweep you off your feet meant nothing? Do you want me to carry on?" I shook my head. Everything Katie had said was true, but of course it was because we'd occupied the same body with the same thoughts for the whole of our life. I didn't need her to carry on because I knew every single thing she was going to say. But I still needed one question answering. "Why now?" I asked. "Because you've had enough of lying to yourself and know in your heart that it's time to accept the inevitable and set me free. You realize that we are not two souls fighting each other for supremacy, but one soul that needs to live their life to the full. What you see in front of you is the life you've denied yourself for too long. I'm here to tell you it's now yours to take if you want it." All of my distress over Katie's earlier brutal assessment of me vanished as I felt my body tingle with excitement. I knew it was time to set Katie free, but I could only do that by slipping away myself. And as I stood up, I knew there was one more thing I needed to do before I left. I walked over to the sofa on the far end and spoke to the guy Katie had singled out earlier. "You don't know me," I started, "but there's a lady over there who'd really like to get to know you." He said nothing but smiled as he walked over and sat down beside her just as I'd done an hour earlier. And I felt nothing but joy that that wonderful woman could finally have the happiness she'd craved for so long. "Good morning, it's 7 a.m. and here is the news." My clock radio woke me with a start, and as I pulled myself together to start a new day, the details of my dream came flooding back. Why had it taken such a graphic dream to tell me so much that I already knew on the one hand and yet so much that I wasn't prepared to accept on the other? And I realized that Katie was a metaphor for every time I'd stood in front of the mirror and seen not who I was but who I wanted to be. And my frayed jeans and scuffed shoes were the metaphor for the way I'd managed my life up to then. And the guy on the sofa was not a sign that I'd been romantically barking up the wrong tree all my life, although he did look quite handsome, what am I saying, but more a metaphor for the happiness that awaited Katie if I set her free. As luck would have it, today was a day off, but there and then, I decided it would be Katie's day, not mine. and as I put on her clothes, my clothes, and watched her face slowly emerge in the makeup mirror, I knew that there was now no going back. I knew exactly where my destiny lay, and that shy, apathetic, scruffy individual would no longer prevent me from getting there.